You've probably heard the buzz, right? The hype, maybe even some of the skepticism around blockchain.
Definitely.
But what is it really? Is it just about, these speculative cryptocurrencies going up and down? Or is there something bigger?
Something more foundational, yeah.
Exactly. Something brewing beneath the surface.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us feel like we need a shortcut, to get a handle on it without getting totally lost in the tech talk or just overwhelmed by headlines.
And it's exactly what we're aiming for today. We're doing a deep dive into the actual technology, the blockchain itself, and what it could really mean.
Okay.
We've got a great stack of sources, including insights from a really key book called Blockchain Revolution. And our mission, basically, is to pull out the most important bits of knowledge.
The nuggets.
The nuggets, yeah. And maybe some surprising facts, too. Just help you grasp why this matters. And it really does matter to everyone, from, big finance people to just everyday individuals online.
So exploring the power, the potential.
And the pitfalls. Got to look at those, too.
Right. So the big idea here, it isn't just about some new tech gadget. It's more about this concept of a trust protocol. Is that right?
That's a great way to put it. A new way to establish certainty.
Yeah.
And it promises to potentially re-architect some really fundamental things.
Like what?
Well, finance, obviously, but also how we govern ourselves, even how we define ownership or interact with the world online.
So it's like a sneak peek at a possible future.
Kind of, yeah. Deconstructing the promise and, well, the peril of blockchain.
Yeah.
Trying to make it accessible, but also, dig into the substance.
Okay, let's do it. Where do we start? The trust problem.
Let's start right there, demystifying it. Think back to the first era of the internet, the early days of e-commerce.
Right.
Paying with a credit card online felt, well, kind of risky, didn't it?
Yeah, definitely insecure. You gave away so much personal info.
Exactly. Huge amounts of data. And the transaction fees, especially for smaller amounts, could be really high.
And the consequences were real. Those massive data breaches. Anthem, wasn't it? Like 79 million people.
Yeah, 2015. Huge. Or Uber in 2016, 57 million accounts.
And the worst part is, usually it's you, the individual, who carries the risk and has to clean up the mess.
Precisely. It highlighted this fundamental lack of trust online, which led cryptographer Nick Szabo to talk about this idea of a God protocol.
The God protocol.
Yeah, his point was, for online business to work, you basically had to trust the middlemen, the banks, the payment processors, like they were infallible. Every transaction was basically a leap of faith.
Okay, I see the problem. So that's the gap that Satoshi Nakamoto, whoever that is.
Right, the mysterious creator or creators of Bitcoin. That's the gap they aimed to fill when they unleashed the technological genie, as one source puts it.
With Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just about digital cash, was it? It was about solving that trust issue.
Exactly. And the how is what's revolutionary. They didn't build a bigger bank or a more powerful intermediary.
Yeah.
No, they manufactured trust using, well, clever code and this idea of mass collaboration powered by collective self-interest.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
It created a distributed trust network, something the internet always needed but never really had. A security layer built right in.
So how does it actually work then, this trust machine?
Well, at its core, it's actually quite elegant. Think of it like this. Every 10 minutes or so, on the Bitcoin network anyway, all the transactions that happened are gathered up.
Okay.
They're verified, cleared, and bundled into a block.
Right.
Then, this block is cryptographically linked, like with a unique digital fingerprint, to the block that came right before it.
Creating a chain.
Exactly, an unalterable chain. Because each block confirms the one before it all the way back to the beginning. It's time-stamped permanently.
Meaning you can't just go back and secretly change something.
Nope. You have to rewrite the entire history with everyone watching, which is computationally almost impossible. It's a distributed ledger, basically a shared, agreed-upon record of every transaction ever. Some call it a worldwide ledger of value.
Wow, okay. That makes sense.
And this core idea, this distributed ledger, gives rise to what the sources call the 7 design principles of the blockchain economy. These are like the architectural pillars.
Okay, let's walk through them. Principle 1.
Networked integrity. This is key. Instead of trusting a big company or a government, you trust the network itself.
How does that work?
The network verifies identities, vouches for reputations.
Yeah.
It ensures the transactions and the information recorded are reliable, no matter what any single person or entity does.
So the implications are huge. Marriage records, supply chains.
Anything where you need verifiable, trustworthy records without relying on one central authority.
Okay. That leads nicely into the second principle, I guess.
It does. Distributed power. It's a peer-to-peer network. There's no single point of control.
No central server to hack.
Exactly. No single entity that could just shut it down. And if someone tries to overwhelm the system, say, by trying to fake transactions,
It's visible.
it's visible and it's incredibly expensive. Because of things like proof of work, which requires massive computing power, massive electricity use to validate transactions or try to cheat.
So it makes cheating economically stupid, basically.
Pretty much. Power shifts from the center to the edges to the peers on the network.
All right, principle 3.
Value as incentive. This is where the token, like Bitcoin itself, comes in. It's not just digital money, it's part of the system's design.
How so?
Satoshi built in rewards for people who contribute to the network, who validate transactions, who maintain the ledger. It aligns everyone's self-interest with the health of the network.
A globally distributed nest egg, as
Yeah.
one source called it.
Yeah. It basically pays people to be trustworthy and predictable. It compels them to do the right thing because it's in their financial interest.
Yeah.
A big contrast to traditional finance, where sometimes...
Bad incentives led to bad behavior.
Exactly. Number 4 is security. This uses something called public key infrastructure, PKI. It's advanced cryptography. Think of it like having 2 keys. A public one anyone can use to send you something, like an address.
And a private one only you have.
Right, to sign transactions or unlock your assets. It's much more secure than relying on, say, Target's firewall. Bitcoin is actually the biggest civilian use of PKI anywhere.
Makes sense. Number 5.
Privacy. And this is interesting. The core blockchain network itself doesn't require your identity.
No name, no email.
Not at the base transaction layer, no. Identification and verification can be built on top, but they're separate. This allows for concepts like personal avatars or davatars.
Avatars?
Yeah, like your personal digital black box of information. You control it. You only reveal what's absolutely necessary for a specific transaction.
Which is the opposite of the data fracking model
Of Facebook and Google, yeah,
Ah.
where they hoover up everything.
Okay, principle 6.
Rights preserved. This means ownership rights of property, of data, of intellectual property become transparent and, crucially, enforceable on the blockchain.
How? Through those smart contracts.
Exactly. Smart contracts. Think of them as automated agreements, like a vending machine. You put in the right input, money, data, whatever, the conditions are met, and the output, the product, the service, the access, is automatically dispensed.
But they can be more complex than a vending machine.
Oh, much more. They can handle complex sets of instructions, multi-party agreements, multi-sig. They ensure contracts are followed without needing a traditional enforcer. Imagine a contract that literally couldn't be seized, stopped, or redirected once the conditions are set.
Powerful. Okay, and the last one, number 7.
Inclusion. This is about lowering barriers. Blockchain could enable a kind of distributed capitalism.
How?
Anyone with an internet connection, even just a basic phone, could potentially participate. You don't necessarily need a bank account or proof of citizenship or even a stable local currency in some cases.
So it cuts costs for sending money.
Drastically.
And
It potentially gives access to financial services and global trade for billions who are currently excluded.
billions. Wow, okay, those 7 principles really paint a picture.
They provide the framework, yeah.
So with that foundations, let's look at where this power could actually transform things. Starting with finance. Seems obvious.
Yeah, financial services.
Yeah.
One source describes the current global system as a kind of Rube Goldberg contraption.
Ah,
Okay, meaning...
needlessly complicated, you know, surprisingly slow behind-the-scenes transactions clear fast, but actual settlement takes days, weeks sometimes,
Okay.
opaque, and expensive because all those intermediaries,
I'll take a cut.
they take their cut, often outsized benefits, as the book puts it. They benefit from the float the time your money is in transit.
Right. So how does blockchain disrupt this?
Well, think about the core functions of finance: storing value, moving it, lending it, exchanging it.
Hey.
The golden 8 functions, some call them. Blockchain can potentially do many of these things better, faster, cheaper,
By cutting out the middlemen.
by disintermediating incumbents, yeah. The impact could be huge. Take risk management.
If settlement happens almost instantly on the blockchain, you could basically eliminate settlement risk, counterparty risk, even systemic risk, like the kind we saw flare up in 2008 with the Herstat risk issue.
Because the transaction and the settlement happen almost simultaneously.
Exactly. And transparency. Imagine having financial records that are auditable in real time. No more waiting for quarterly reports.
Your books could be in order every 10 minutes.
Right. Think how attractive that would be to investors. It could eliminate a lot of human error, maybe even prevent certain kinds of fraud.
And you mentioned democratizing ownership.
Yeah, democratizing ownership. Blockchain allows for things like initial coin offerings or similar token-based fundraising.
Yeah.
You could have millions of small investors from all over the world contributing, fostering truly distributed ownership.
It's interesting how the big banks reacted, isn't it? Initially, it was all dismissal.
Oh yeah, Bitcoin bad, blockchain good. That was the mantra for a while. Jamie Dimon calling Bitcoin a fraud.
But they've changed their tune.
They have.
Yeah.
Now, you see JP Morgan, Bank of America, they acknowledge crypto as a risk, sure, but also a massive opportunity. Goldman Sachs bought a crypto exchange.
And they're building their own versions, right? Permission blockchains.
Exactly. Things like the R3 Consortium, the Hyperledger project, incumbents trying to adopt and, well, capture this technology for their own internal efficiencies, often in a more controlled, private way.
Okay, so finance is a huge one. Where else? The Internet of Things, IoT.
Yeah, IoT.
Right.
We're talking billions of connected devices, smart homes, industrial sensors, cars.
But it hasn't quite lived up to the hype yet.
Not fully. It's hampered by security issues like, remember, the Uber hack involved IoT vulnerabilities? Scalability is a problem, and everything relies on centralized databases.
Which are hackable single points of failure.
Right, so enter the idea of the ledger of everything.
Okay.
Blockchain could be the missing piece to really make IoT secure and scalable. Imagine smart devices registering themselves on a blockchain, securely communicating peer-to-peer.
Smart power poles reporting their own status.
Yeah, or automatically rerouting power if there's an outage. Or think even further, self-driving supercars, as the book calls them,
Self-driving Ubers.
that manage their own existence on the blockchain, paying for fuel, insurance, collecting fares, operating as autonomous agents without a central company managing every detail.
Wow. That opens up completely different business models.
Totally. Micro-monetizing spare capacity, your Wi-Fi, your computer's processing power when you're not using it.
Or tracking things, like food safety.
Perfect example.
Tracking
The provenance of goods. Imagine tracing every single cut of meat back to the farm, maybe even its DNA, on an immutable ledger. That brings incredible transparency and accountability.
Okay, that's fascinating. Let's shift to a broader societal level. There's this idea of the new prosperity paradox.
Yeah, this observation that even though the global economy grows, prosperity for many people stagnates and inequality increases.
So how can blockchain address that?
Well, several ways. A huge one is financial inclusion.
We touched on this. For the unbanked.
Exactly. Billions of people lack the formal ID needed for a bank account. Blockchain could provide a secure, verifiable digital identity based on reputation and transactions.
Giving them access to financial services they never had before, like India's Aadhaar program, but maybe even more decentralized.
Potentially, yeah. As one expert put it, maybe the biggest redistribution is not a redistribution of wealth, but a redistribution of value, giving people the tools to participate.
And remittances, sending money home.
Huge potential there. You mentioned Annalie's story earlier, paying 7% fees, waiting weeks. That's billions skimmed off the top globally.
A ripoff, basically.
Yeah. Companies like Abra are aiming for maybe 2% fees, transfers in hours, by using blockchain and essentially turning every smartphone into a potential money transfer point.
Like every user is a teller.
Kind of, yeah, decentralizing it.
What about humanitarian aid?
Humanitarian aid. Big potential for transparency. Tracking donations directly to recipients using blockchain. Reduces corruption, prevents double spending. USF is already experimenting with this using smart contracts.
Ensuring the aid actually gets where it's needed.
Exactly. And finally, asset ownership, especially land titles.
Why is that so important?
In many developing countries, land records are insecure, easily forged, or non-existent. This prevents people from borrowing against their property, investing, rebuilding after disasters. Secure, blockchain-based titles could be transformative for economic development.
Okay, that's a powerful set of potential solutions. What about how businesses themselves operate? The structure of the firm?
Yeah, this is really interesting. Blockchain could fundamentally change the economics of the firm by reducing what economists call search costs and contracting costs,
Meaning?
making it easier and cheaper for businesses to find and collaborate with people or capabilities outside their own walls.
Through things like smart contracts again.
Exactly. Smart contracts are key here. Remember, they're not just simple agreements. They're software that executes complex instructions automatically on the blockchain.
Going beyond the vending machine analogy.
Way beyond. Complex multi-party agreements, automated payments based on verifiable milestones. It reduces the need for lawyers and intermediaries to enforce basic contracts.
And then there's this wild idea, distributed autonomous enterprises, BAEs?
Yeah, DAEs. It's pretty radical. Imagine an organization with effectively neither management nor employees in the traditional sense.
Run entirely by code.
Run by software, by algorithms, governed by rules embedded in smart contracts on the blockchain, potentially displacing traditional corporations.
No overcompensated CEO, no corporate bureaucracy.
Everything just runs according to the pre-agreed coded rules. It's a mind-bending concept.
How would that impact jobs, like human resources?
Well, the impact on HR could be profound, maybe shifting from thinking about jobs to be filled to tasks to be sourced.
Sourcing tasks globally.
Yeah, relying on verifiable digital credentials on the blockchain to prove skills and experience rather than just resumes, using these black boxes of professional info.
Could reduce bias, maybe?
Potentially, yes. Less reliance on institutional reputation or personal networks. But maybe you lose some serendipity, those unexpected great hires that come from chance encounters.
What about marketing? Is that affected?
Big time. Think about ending data fracking.
Okay.
New models like Pay for Attention. Brave Browser's Basic Attention Token, BAT, is an example. Users actually get paid tiny amounts of crypto for choosing to view ads.
So you control your data and get compensated for your attention.
Exactly. Puts the value back with the individual, not just the big tech platforms.
Let's look at government and society now. Are there real-world examples?
Absolutely. Estonia is often cited for integrated government.
Their e-residency program.
Yeah, and their underlying X-Road system, which uses blockchain principles. They've digitized almost all public services. It offers incredible convenience for citizens.
And attracts businesses too, right? Because it's easy to interact with the government.
Exactly. Then there's blockchain voting.
The dream of secure, transparent elections.
That's the idea. Recording votes as transactions on a blockchain, potentially transparent, anonymous if designed right, and highly resistant to tampering. Projects like Demos, CommitCoin are exploring this.
What about this concept of liquid democracy?
That's an interesting one. It's about making democracy more flexible, allowing citizens to delegate their vote on specific issues to experts they trust.
So you don't have to be an expert on everything.
Right. You could delegate your vote on environmental policy to an environmental scientist you trust, but keep your vote on economic policy, for example. More customization and personalization of democracy.
And using blockchain to manage those delegations securely.
Precisely. And beyond voting, think about solving big problems. Could we tokenize carbon emissions for personal carbon trading schemes?
Track your own carbon footprint.
And trade allowances, yeah. Or use prediction markets on the blockchain to gather citizen insights on policy issues. Or run online citizen juries to improve accountability.
Okay. One more big area, the creative industries. Music, art.
Yeah, this is huge. The first internet era wasn't always kind to creators, was it?
No, intermediaries took massive cuts. Musicians, artists often struggled to get paid fairly for digital work.
Exactly. Blockchain offers the potential for a fair music industry, for instance. Artists controlling their own work directly.
Defining usage rights, setting prices, getting paid instantly.
Right. Imogen Heap did that experiment with her song Tiny Human on the blockchain years ago, controlling the entire ecosystem herself.
What about the traditional art market? It's notoriously opaque.
Blockchain can bring transparency there too, using it to authenticate artwork, track its provenance, its history of ownership. Companies like Verisart, Artlery are doing this, creates an immutable record.
Tackles forgery and builds trust.
Yeah. And think about free speech and free press.
How does blockchain help there?
Empowering journalists through direct crowdfunding on blockchain platforms. Enabling private, encrypted communication tools like GetGems that are resistant to censorship or state control.
And even education.
Yeah, potential uses in education too. Securely issuing and verifying credentials from MOOCs or universities. Transparently tracking financial aid. Even creating verifiable learning plans for literacy programs in developing nations.
So the potential applications are incredibly broad.
They really are, across almost every sector.
But let's be realistic, there have to be challenges,
Okay.
right? Roadblocks, showstoppers.
Oh, absolutely. And the sources are clear. These are formidable obstacles. Not necessarily reasons it will fail, but implementation challenges to overcome. Big ones.
Okay, like what? The energy consumption thing always comes up.
Energy consumption. Yes. Bitcoin mining, especially using proof of work, uses a shocking amount of electricity. More than some countries.
Are there solutions?
People are working on it. More efficient algorithms. Things like proof of stake instead of proof of work. Immersion cooling for mining rigs. But it's a major issue. Plus, the hardware becomes obsolete quickly, creating e-waste.
Okay, what else? Scalability.
Scalability. Big one. Bitcoin's 10-minute block time might be secure, but it's way too slow for, say, processing millions of IoT sensor readings per second or handling Visa-level transaction volumes.
The block size debate.
Exactly. Ongoing arguments about how to increase capacity without sacrificing decentralization or security. Things like Bitcoin XT were early attempts. It's a fundamental technical hurdle.
Then there's a more philosophical challenge: immutability.
Societal change and immutability.
Yeah.
A system that never forgets. Is that always a good thing?
The right to be forgotten.
Exactly. Human societies need mechanisms for forgiveness, for second chances, sometimes even for deliberately obliterating records, as one source puts it. Money itself is a social construct. Can a purely immutable ledger always serve social needs? Someone called the system that never forgets slightly sociopathic. It raises deep questions.
And regulation. The law always lags behind tech.
Regulatory lag, always an issue with disruptive tech, creates a governance gap. You saw early attempts like New York's BitLicense, which many felt was too heavy-handed.
Versus Canada's approach.
Yeah, the Canadian Senate report was much more positive, basically saying government should largely get out of the way and foster innovation. Finding the right balance is tough.
What about the big players trying to control it? Incumbent capture.
That's a real risk. Incumbent capture. That powerful corporations could co-opt the technology, create private, permissioned blockchains, walled gardens that undermine the original open, decentralized vision. Similar to fears about the early internet becoming centralized.
Needs active effort to prevent that.
Definitely. Then there's the criminal use argument.
Silk Road, dark markets.
Right. Naysayers always point to that. But honestly, criminals use all kinds of technology, phones, the internet, cash. Blockchain isn't unique. And ironically, the immutable ledger can actually help law enforcement trace illicit activities. It's not truly anonymous in many cases.
Good point. What about losing control? Rogue AI running on a blockchain.
Human agency and control. That's a fascinating frontier, especially with DAEs, those distributed autonomous enterprises. How do you govern them? How do you prevent bugs or hostile takeovers by algorithms? How do you ensure human oversight when needed? These are unanswered questions.
So, facing all these challenges, what kind of leadership is needed?
Well, it can't just be top-down government regulation. The sources stress the need for multi-stakeholder governance.
Meaning?
Bringing everyone to the table, the developers, the financial institutions, academics, governments, civil society groups, advocacy networks. It has to be collaborative because the tech moves too fast for traditional regulation alone.
Even central banks are rethinking their role, right?
Absolutely. They're facing existential questions. If money isn't just issued by them anymore, what is their role in a distributed global financial system? They're studying it intently. The goal isn't necessarily stronger regulation, but maybe smarter regulation, fostering transparency, empowering citizens to help enforce rules.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground.
We have, from the basic principles to the potential transformations and the very real challenges.
We've taken that deep dive into blockchain's journey, the trust protocol, distributed power, finance, IoT, governance, creativity, and those significant hurdles.
And it's important to remember this isn't just, another incremental tech update. It feels more like a critical juncture.
Why?
Because the pace of technological change is accelerating so rapidly. It's outstripping our existing institutions, our regulations. It really demands we rethink some fundamental structures in society.
So as we enter this potential second generation of the internet,
we face this huge opportunity, a choice, really. Can we use these new tools to create more universal prosperity, more inclusion, shared value?
Or does it risk making things worse?
Or does it inadvertently deepen inequality, creating, as one source starkly warns, nothing less than class warfare? It's a profound choice point.
Suggesting we need a new kind of social contract for this digital age.
Exactly. A declaration of interdependence, perhaps. Recognizing and enforcing basic digital rights access, literacy, freedom from surveillance, real accountability for institutions, both old and new.
So the final thought for everyone listening. This isn't just going to happen automatically.
Not at all. It requires active participation, critical thinking.
What part will you play in shaping this future? How do we ensure this incredibly powerful technology actually serves humanity?
The discussion's wide open.
Yeah.
And everyone's engagement really is critical.